based on that comment. But here's what I will say. In the same room, I was here across the hall and I was spending time with the custodial staff during the summer months. And I'm walking by and I see all these grandparents and I'm like, somebody told me all these parents were going to be here. What's this all about? So I kind of just eased in, and it was the robotics team having a robotics camp, and this was a Friday, so I think it was like the culminating activity of the capstone, and kids were demonstrating their learning. Who's connected with the robotics crew? So man, it was impressive. Impressive. Kids kind of managing and running the whole thing for the adults. Very, very impressive. And then the other thing that happened was, I was heading home one day, and I see these girls, and they're holding up these signs, and they got a little dance move going on. I'm like, what's going on? That's Sonic. So then I stop in at Sonic, and there I see the Tigerettes and a fundraiser. Who's on first base with the Tigerettes?
She's at practice.
Manage themselves. Anyway, they were doing a good job of it that day. So spent that time with the Tigerettes, and they too insisted that they are the best, and they were trying to raise some money to head to Orlando to demonstrate that whole notion of being the best. So all I'm going to say, Principal Falkenberry, is I've seen a few indicators. That might push in that direction. Very brief, I know this is an important time in terms of staff meetings, but as superintendent of schools, you don't really get many opportunities to do what I'm doing today. Generally, that role is reserved for those principals or those directors or those coordinators and assistant principals who kind of give some of the day-to-day technical type marching orders. I call it technical assistance to get us to where we need to be in the school district. But I have a mentor by the name of Dr. Charles Webb, retired Brigadier General, retired school superintendent, I mean an awesome, awesome human being. He said, when you get these opportunities, you'll know you're doing it right if you walk through the door and they say, oh my goodness, there he is, and he's going to talk about X. Put another way, Dr. Webb said, his words, when you get this opportunity, you should be purposefully redundant so that they know when they see you, these big ideas are going to come out. Because you keep them at the forefront from that highest level, and everything going on from a technical level, everyone can put a critique on it and say, that's in alignment with it. What are we doing this for? That's not what I heard the Brigadier General say. So here it is, for me. It'll always be our school board's priorities. Each year we'll go through an exercise as a district with myself and my team of cabinet members in the school board, really examining what should be the priorities for the year. And I'm also one that believes less is more. I don't think it should be a laundry list of priorities. If you noticed on the back of your programs during the kickoff, we were able to turn that triangle upside down and narrow it to three such priorities for this year. You'll always hear me talk about those. I'll spend a few minutes doing that today. And then this umbrella topic that I believe will take me to my rocking chair, and hopefully some of you remember me by, and that's this whole notion of equity and what that means for all students. So that's always going to be a part of the conversation. And I don't like to leave any space, so be thinking about this without this notion of two-way communication. Put another way, you don't just come into a space and sit and get and exit stage right, but some opportunity for Q&A. So we would also afford that time, given how much time the good Principal Falkenberry has. How much time do we have to get through those three things?
Well, our norm is we have to be out by 3:45, and there's a presentation behind you.
Okay,
but
15 minutes.
There you go.
15 minutes. Okay. So when you think about the board's priorities, Katie Collier was masterful in doing it from 3 up to 1. Remember in the back sheet of paper, maybe you took that piece of paper and put it on one of those boards there in your classroom. But priority 3, the board really has some concern based on the events of the last 24 months around public trust and trust with all stakeholders. That's just not external, but that's external and internal. So as I got into that priority, understanding why that was a priority, I looked at all of the different communication mechanisms that exist in our school district, and I can tell you the district, by and large, does an excellent job of communicating. The challenge is, it's kind of like, maybe this doesn't happen in your households, but it happens in mine, so just play along with me for a little while. You can do all of these great things when you're in this relationship, and our work is a relationship between us and our community, us and those we lead. It's a relationship. And you can do all these great things in this relationship, but the one time you do something wrong, it's like all of your good deeds go unnoticed. You know, maybe that happens in my house from time to time. Like, can I not get credit? Do I not get credit for all the great things that I've done? That's the way it kind of plays out from time to time. Research tells us one bad experience from a PR, a communication standpoint, it has to be offset by 10 positive experiences to change the course of the narrative in that same area. So if it's in the area of transparency, for example, you're going to have 10 positive broad communications around transparency to change the narrative from that one negative. So that's some of the work that the board wants us to commit to around priority 3. Priority 2 it's twofold. Generally when people read it, what I'm finding is they only see one thing. But trust me, there are 2 things there. Priority 2 talks about comprehensive facilities master planning. And when people see that, they immediately go to issues of capacity and what is that going to mean in terms of rezoning or building. That's the first place we go. But I want to challenge us to look a little deeper and look at that whole notion of defining and having 21st century learning spaces for all kids. Because we can deal with the notions of numbers and balance things out, but have we really grappled with this notion of what does it mean to have 21st century learning spaces for all students? The word used in the priority is equitable access to 21st century learning spaces. And how is that defined grades pre-K through 3, for example? And how is it defined 4 through 6, and at the middle grades level and at the secondary level? Yesterday was a masterful display of it for a small group of students in our MIC program. But we should be grappling with that notion of 21st century learning spaces regardless of program or grade. We do know that there's some hot spots in the district around building capacity. We tend to gravitate to the high school piece of that conversation, but really our more pressing needs are at the elementary and the middle grades level. Summit Lakes Middle School, Hazel Grove Elementary School, the area out by Mason Elementary School, those are probably the hottest spots in our district, but we tend to gravitate to the secondary, which too needs to be a part of the conversation. And we'll go deeper around Q&A if we want to go deeper in that area. And the most important priority, I believe, to be priority number 1. And that kind of leads me into some conversation about this notion of equity. But priority 1 talks about this whole notion of alignment between the needs of our students in terms of their academic performance, what we've written into our strategic plan, or CSIP, or Destination 2021, and what we are being informed by in our ASR from last year, Academic Systems Review. Raise your hand if you heard anything about the Academic Systems Review. What we're finding is that there are some disconnect between what we've written into our CSIP plan and what's been stated to us in terms of recommendations and findings in our ASR. And then we're being more and more informed about the needs of our students. How are they showing up to the schoolhouse door? That's a lot in that priority. That's a lot in that priority in terms of changing our district-wide trajectory around performance. Here's what I believe I know in a short period of time about our performance. Overall, performance is high, but by and large, it's high and flat. It's pretty consistent. A little bit of that, but by and large, it's high and flat overall. And there are other districts around the country, suburban districts with high performance, that are still able to demonstrate, even here in our metropolitan area, an upward trajectory from a point of high overall performance. So how do we do that and be able to quantify this notion of excellence or being the best, kind of what we talked about during the kickoff, that our community has grown to expect And I might add rightfully so. From a resource standpoint, from a support standpoint, from the work that you all do, and I can't wait to get in some classrooms and really see that work, we should really have no peers in this metropolitan area. So how do we get there? And that's going to be important work for us going forward. I tend to believe, and my leadership will come from a place of challenging the organization to sharpen its equity lens. What does that mean? Simple definition, wanting to allow for some time for question, is giving every kid what he or she needs in every situation. And once we become proficient at that, then we can substitute that word kid. Because now that we are focused on an equity-based decision-making framework, we can substitute the word kid for giving every building what they need in every situation. And then once we're inside of the building, we can say giving every grade level what they need in every situation. In the case of a high school, every content area what they need in a given situation, realizing that that won't always be equal. Sound alike, but very different. And what we're finding in the research is that can increase the trajectory of an organization regardless of whether it's an urban district, a suburban district, or a rural district. That's the first finding. And the secondary finding, if you start reading more about equity in a place called school, you'll realize that resource usage declines. Because the old way of doing business says, you make a request for something, Principal Falkenberry, he's done the research, knows something that's needed here in this school, and one of the first things the system says, we're all a part of the system, in this case it would be the district, what would we say? Well, if we give that to you, then what do we have to do? Come on, wake up, I know it's afternoon. If we give it to you, we have to give it to them. That's the bureaucratic response, right? But them, whoever they are, may not have expressed or demonstrated the need. And then what happens is we bog down giving what's needed to the requesting party who has a demonstrated need. And if we're willing to stand up and talk through and coach through a conversation about why we use equity for students at the center to make that decision to provide or not, and how that might not be necessary here, resource allocation goes down and performance in those organizations goes up. Very different, goes against everything we were initially taught, but I can tell you, you can put in your computer right now, educational equity, and I guarantee you, Google will get exhausted with the number of responses. That's where education is moving now. That's a challenge, it defies and turns on its head everything we thought we knew about effective governance around schooling, but we tend to believe that that is the way to braid excellence and equity, to get to a trajectory that the community expects, we expect, and our kids deserve, most importantly. Questions, concerns, comments related to what I've said, unrelated to what I've said. If it's too personal, I'll call time out, don't worry. But any thoughts, questions, comments, burning ideas? I have a superintendent that would bend his ear. I have not had a high school yet to not respond.
Give us a minute, with process.
Wait time.
Process, process,
Wait time.
process.
Talk to your neighbor and then we'll see what happens.
Yes, I know, that's what I do. I do have a question, actually, and I'm running the camera, but you had talked about the boundaries, and many of us have children at the high school level where class sizes are come out of control, and I understand you mentioned the Hazel Grove and those, and totally think that that's valid. What are when can we, because I've had parents who are not in the district ask me, I'm like, I don't know, about boundary changes, when that might happen, what does that look like? What's the process of when things might change? As far as boundaries for the high school and elementary and middle.
Okay, good question. Dr. Judy Hedrick is kind of heading up our work around priority number 2. As a part of that work, we've kind of developed templates for each of the priorities and what are some of the action steps. And as that's built out, you'll see it prominent. On our website, you'll see it prominent in our communications. What are the steps being taken? And then from those steps, what are some of the recommendations? And to be quite honest, one of the initial steps will probably be a group of people, internal and external, being a part of the dialogue, learning more about what the numbers really mean versus what we believe they mean. We have one of the best demographers in the country. I've looked at his work, and I've looked at it longitudinally even since I've been here. Really doesn't miss on the numbers. He didn't miss this year in terms of what would come to us in terms of students. So we believe we have good information, and now we have to have a process, and I don't believe in making things up. I would tell you, if you want to get me at home, I can be as creative as you all can be at home. But when it comes to this professional space, I just don't believe in making stuff up. There are too many experts out there. There are too many communities that are grappling with the same issues, so we can use best practices to come up with the best decision. Here's what I would tell you. We owe it to our community, and we owe it to ourselves. Primarily, we owe it to our students to really think outside of the box in terms of what are some ways we can be innovative and maybe kick the can down the road a little bit for some boundary changes. Maybe kick the can down the road a little bit for the construction of a $100 million high school, of which, if we had the $100 million, which we don't have the land to place it on, so that's another expenditure. And then once we have it and start duplicating the program and found across the district, that of course has a several $1 million price tag annually. And as our community, not unlike the country, climbs out of the deepest recession we've ever been in, that we'll ever know, hopefully, in our lifetime, how do we do that in a way that lets our public know we've exhausted all of the remedies available to us before we go there? And I believe there's a way to do that and do some awesome things for kids. Very brief, because I want some other questions if you want to. But we put together a task force. Your principal's going to be a part of that task force to look at our educational ecosystem in the entire community. 6 great thinkers from UCM, 6 great thinkers from MCC, and 6 great thinkers from LSR 7, working together to see if there's a way to utilize facility resources across our community to get some of the things done that we want to get done for all kids, and maybe keep us out of that space of movement initially. And we may do some of that and still realize there's some family movement that needs to happen. And we'll do whatever the data and our ability to think through based on some best practices gets us to. Bridge programs across this country where communities are guaranteeing their community that if your child receives a diploma from our community, we can hand them a diploma that has wiped away the cost of 1 year college. Because when he graduates, or when she graduates, they'll graduate, and that diploma not only means they graduated here, but we've bundled courses in such a way that that kid can go to any college in this country and be at year 2. That's happening. Can we be smart enough to figure that out for our kids and do some things? And I think we have a great model of partnership with what we've done with MIC. Now, how do we take some of that to scale for all students? Is that possible? Is it not possible? Something some people a lot smarter than me will think through and maybe put that rezoning conversation out a little bit. But in one of the fastest growing communities, one of the top rate places to live in the country, you're going to have growth. And there's some things that go along with that in terms of what we do. Great question. I want another. Yes, ma'am.
Is there any chance of us changing the schedule sometime in the future as far as allowing later start times for high school, year-round schooling, 4 day a week, 4 days a week, whatever?
That's it again. I don't know, but I understand your question. What does the research tell us? Do we have the will to get there? What are some of the obstacles associated with going there? It's a conversation worth having, especially when you think about playing in the sandbox with other educational entities. You know, we have an example in one of our high schools that runs 2 different schedules now within the same building. I think that example is over at North. And how do we be innovative, but don't make things up? There are places we can look at that can really point to us in terms of a model of what we might do. But yes, If we're being innovative and if we're trying to do what's best for children, I think that in essence means that there may be some shifts. What those shifts are, what they look like, don't know that I can give that answer today. Yes, ma'am.
Talking about the issue number one of trust, I know that back years ago, when they decided to come up with the late start, it was kind of an after effect, tax bond passing. A lot of parents got really mad about that.
Explain that to me. I don't know that history. Just give me help me. I tried to follow you, but I missed it.
I mean, I hope I'm correct on this, but there was a tax bond that did pass that was going to fund some extra professional development, I believe. I'll be right on this.
Well, you care if I take a step?
Yep, please.
I do know about the one that did.
At minimum, there was surveying done of the community. And the returns from the survey were, we are not in favor of late start. And then a year later, it was announced that late start was happening. And so there was about a 1-year gap between survey and start of it. But that's what it was.
Thank you.
So now that you shared that, what's the question?
Okay, so I was wondering, with that, the community kind of, at least I know within my kids' schools, kind of outlashed up. What do I do with kids, this and that? But that lost a lot of trust of who made these decisions, and then the discussion of schedule change. Will you guys happen to poll some parents or teachers in some of this decision making?
I think the district has, and not knowing that story, I think the district has at least a rich recent history. Maybe it doesn't go back as far as one might want it to, and I don't know how far it goes back. But I see lots of evidence of surveying. I'm seeing lots of evidence of surveying. With that being said, again, what is the purpose of a survey? That has to be defined on the front end. Is the purpose of the survey to make a decision, or is the purpose to gather input? Two different purposes. Now, if you're telling me I'm taking a survey and the results will inform the decision that's made to a T, that's one thing. If you're telling me you're just garnering input and trying to check pulse and get ideas, that's another. Because again, we're professionals. We are professionals. All of us. I don't want to go to my doctor and he just tell me, hey, let's take a survey of what we might do to you as it relates to this cancer that I see. And then the survey determines what course to take. No, I want him to consult with the research and best practices based on what he's identified in me. So he may want to know the temperature in terms of what can I handle. Do I want this rigorous schedule around chemo? What do I want to put into radiation? And both might work to the same degree, but I want him to hear my voice, but I also want him to be the professional. So that's a good question, but we have to be clear when a person fills out a survey, what's the purpose of that survey? And I don't know how well we've done that or not, but that's a good point. Yes, sir. I think I'm over my 15, but I have one. Any other?
Okay.
I'm good?
You're okay.
Good.
Earlier you mentioned a philosophy that kind of used the example of one person asking to buy a new piece of something and then you got to buy it for everybody in that area. Do you foresee that philosophy ever trickling into